Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheila, and I have another story called Caught in the Oven. Bonnie, she had come in their kitchen, and there in the oven, the warm oven, Mother had just finished baking something, sat Symes, the old tomcat. Bonnie said, "Symes, you get out of there right now, you naughty cat. You're going to get burnt to a crisp one of these days. Get out of the oven." And Symes jumped down. He liked to sit there. He was smart enough to know not to get in right after Mom had taken something out. But when it was still warm, he liked to get up and sit on the door. And sometimes he climbed on top of the rack inside the oven because it was so nice and warm in there. Well, a few days later, Bonnie had told her mom all about Symes, and she'd said, "Mom, someday that cat's curiosity is gonna get him killed." This day, it was raining outside, so Bonnie couldn't go out to play. And she just didn't like rainy days at all. There was nothing to do. Now, Bonnie, she had two older sisters, and her older sisters helped Mom do the housework and cooking and things like that. So there really wasn't much for Bonnie to do. She did clean up her own room. That was her responsibility. And she helped with the dishes, but that didn't take long at all. And then there wasn't anything to do. Well, she and Lou, her brother, who was a little bit older than she was, they decided to play storekeeper. So they had been busy doing that for a while, but finally Bonnie got tired and Lou went off to do something else. And Bonnie went and she sat in front of the window. And she put her hands up under her cheeks. What can I do? She could count raindrops, but that wasn't any fun. She didn't know what to do. She just sat there and moped and felt very sorry for herself. Well, it wasn't too long till Mother came in and she said, "Bonnie, are you still feeling sorry for yourself because it's raining outside? I have a job for you to do. You take Lou with you, and here, I have a list." And she gave Bonnie the list. She said, "I want you to go to the bakery shop and get the stuff on the list. And here's the money. Now, don't lose it." Well, Bonnie and Lou were both excited. It was fun to go to the bakery, and it was only a little ways down the street. Well, when they got there, they shook their umbrellas and they set them inside the door of the bakery. Now, because it was raining, Mom insisted that they wear their heavy shoes and their coats, and they have their umbrellas with them. But when they got there and they went inside the bakery, they looked around and there wasn't anybody there. Where was Mr. Hudson? And then Bonnie, she looked at the clock. It was 12 o'clock, lunch hour. And Mr. Hudson, he always went next door to his house, and his wife made him lunch. Oh, what were they going to do now? And Lou said, "It's okay. Let's go look around in the bakery." Well, the bakery was a wonderful place, and the kids loved to go there because as soon as you came in the door, You could smell the smell of cookie dough and the huge mixers that sat on the floor. They had so much dough in them that they would raise up to the top. And Mr. Hudson, he would take out a hunk of that dough and he would knead it and knead it and knead it and make it into a nice ball. And he'd put it in oodles and oodles of bread pans. And when he put them in the oven, they would bake and the smell would come out the vents. And there's nothing like the smell of fresh baked bread and fresh baked cookies. Well, it would always make Bonnie hungry. And she would think, oh, I'm starving. I wish I could have a piece of that fresh baked bread right now with butter on it. Today was a little different because there was nobody there. And of course, there was nothing baking in the oven with the baker not being there. The other thing they had liked to see was Mr. Hudson was old. I don't know if he was really old, like the kids thought he was, but he wore a typical baker's hat, went in your hair and then it head and it went poof out. He also wore a big white apron, and he was very sweet and jolly. Since he wasn't there, the kids went walking around. And Lou said, I've got an idea. Let's look in the cool oven. And Bonnie said, what's a cool oven? Lou, being older, he knew more about the bakery. And he said, the cool oven is different. Now, Mr. Hudson, he has three, not just one oven, but three ovens. And two of them are for baking bread and cookies in it. The third one is called a cool oven because it's only used for making crackers and soda crackers because the heat can't be as hot in it. And it's all lined with tiles to keep the heat even so the crackers don't burn. Well, most of the time, Mr. Hudson doesn't bake anything because he only bakes in the cool oven when he wants to make soda crackers. And if he's had an order for soda crackers, so they went back and they got to where those ovens were. And Lou said, there's the cool oven. And he pulled up the handle and he opened that big iron door. And Bonnie, she looked inside. She said, it's just like a big cave, isn't it? Well, Bonnie wasn't very big. And she turned to Lou and said, oh, I wonder what it's like inside. She wasn't thinking. And Lou said, well, we can get inside and see what it's like. We can pretend we're pirates in a big cave. Or Bonnie said, maybe we can pretend to be big hibernating bears. So they crawled up into that oven. Now, boys and girls, never, never, never get in an oven. Never. Well, they got inside and they messed around for a little while. They were only in there for a few minutes. But when they were looking at the back of it, all of a sudden, that big door came around and it clanked shut. Bonnie and Lou, They looked at each other. It was dark in there. There was a little tiny sliver of light that came through where the door jamb was. And Bonnie said, "We're going to suffocate. There's not going to be any air in here. Oh, what are we going to do, Lou?" Well, Lou went over and he patted Bonnie. He said, "It's okay. I'll yell and pound on the door, and the baker will open it, I'm sure." So that is exactly what he did. Now, Lou was quite a bit taller than Bonnie, so he couldn't stand up inside of that oven. He had to bend himself over, and he got over to that door, and he knelt down and he started pounding on it and yelling, "We're in the oven! Let us out! We're in the cool oven! Let us out!" Pound, 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 he pounded. But the kids hadn't thought about. As soon as Mr. Hudson got back in the bakery, he turned on all the machines. Those huge, huge mixers were going round and round and round. And Mr. Hudson had turned on the other ovens. Now, down in the basement was a huge furnace. And from that furnace, there were big pipes that came up underneath his huge ovens, and that would fill them with hot air that would bake that bread and cookies. There were fans and whir, and everything in the bakery seemed to be making noise. And Mr. Hudson, he didn't know there was anybody there. Well, Lou, he started pounding more and yelling, and Bonnie helped yell, "Help, let us out, we're in the oven, help, help." And they pounded and pounded and pounded. But Mr. Hudson didn't hear them. And then they heard another noise, the sound of metal scraping underneath the cool oven. Back went. And Lou went, "Oh no! Those were the vents opening. The cool oven, the vents are always closed so none of the heat comes into it. Unless Mr. Hudson wants to bake something, he must have got an order for crackers." And then the vents to that oven started to blow warm air. Suddenly, I mean, it had only been probably a few seconds, but suddenly it was getting really hot in there. Oh, they were going to be like cooked crackers. Oh, well, they had to think of something. They had yelled till they were hoarse and they had pounded till their hands hurt. Then Bonnie said, "Let's pray. Oh, Mama says that God always listens to children's prayers." And she was right. Well, they immediately said a short prayer asking God to help them, to not let them get baked. Well, just as soon as Bonnie had closed her mouth from praying, she thought of something. And she said, "Lou, do you have that pencil and that string that we were using to play when we were playing storekeeper this morning?" He said, "Yeah, I think so." He stuck his hands in his pockets and he pulled up a string and a stub of a pencil. And Bonnie said, "Do you have a match?" Well, The kids, both of them, knew that you never played with matches, and neither one of them ever had matches. She didn't know why she'd asked. But Lou stuck his hand in the other pocket and he said, "Yeah, I have one." He said, "What do you want me to do? What are we going to do with all this?" And then Bonnie pulled out the bakery list that Mom had made it, and she said, "Quick, poke a hole in the corner of the paper and run your string through and tie the string. And then, when I light the match, take the pencil and write 'help' in big letters across the note." Lou did what he was told. Bonnie, she scraped that match, and that little flame sparked. And for just a few seconds, there was light inside that oven. And Lou, he wrote HELP, help. He said, "Now what do I do with it?" Well, the match had gone out and it was dark in there again. She said, "Go over to the crack of the door. See where the door jamb is? There's a crack. Push the flat paper through the crack, but keep a hold of the string and make the string go up and down. Maybe the baker will see it fluttering in front of the oven and help us." And they started yelling again, "Help, we're in the oven, help." And they pounded, and Lou sat there, and he went up and down with that paper on the string. Well, it seemed like forever to the two kids caught in the oven, but in reality, it was only a matter of minutes. But it was getting really hot. It was hard to breathe in there. Plus, Lou had to kneel down on his knees. And of course, wherever his skin was against the bottom of that oven, they were starting to burn. Both of the kids were very careful that they didn't touch the sides of the oven or the top of it because it was so hot. They just kept their feet. They were so glad for their heavy shoes. But in order for Lou to make that note go up and down, he had to kneel on his knees in front of that door. When they thought they couldn't take it any longer, suddenly that door flew open. And there was the baker, and the two children tumbled out. The baker's eyes were huge. He said, "I didn't expect there to be kids in my oven." And he ran to the phone and he called the doctor's office and said, "Dr. Hendricks, please come quick." And the doctor came, and both children's hands were burnt on the palms. Not terribly bad, but they really hurt. And their knees, especially Leo's knees. And the doctor wrapped them all up in white bandages and on the knees and wrapped them all up. And then the doctor took them home. Well, when they got to the door and the kids were walking in that door, Mom saw those bandages on their hands and their knees, and she rushed forward. "My kids! What happened to my kids?" And the doctor said, "Your children will be fine. They just won't be able to play ball for a long time." And he said, he had a bag, and he said, "Here's some bread and cookies, compliments of the baker." When the doctor had gone, Mother said, "Whatever made you do such a silly thing?" Bonnie said, "I was curious." And Mom said, You were curious. Oh, I've told you that God gives you a brain to think with. You need to think before you do things. You could have died in that oven if the baker hadn't come back. I am so glad. And the kids told Mother about their experience of getting in there and how the baker had come back and he'd shut the door because he didn't know they were in there and he'd gotten an order for crackers. And so the vents had come open and the oven was starting to get hot. It was just like when Symes, their tomcat, would crawl in the oven, Mama. Only this was really hot. It was getting hotter, not cooler. Oh, Mama. The time came in the story when Bonnie told Mom that they remembered to pray. And she said, because you always said, Mama, that God listens to children's pray. And then she sat there thinking, and she said, Mama, I got the idea to use the grocery list that you'd made for the baker and the string and the pencil while we were praying. I think that was a message directly from God. And Mother agreed. Well, several weeks later, part of the reason Bonnie had been so bored on that rainy day was because her best friend Hetty had the measles, and the doctor had quarantined their house. Nobody could go in or out for 3 whole weeks. Well, those 3 weeks were past, and Hetty was better, so Bonnie had ran over to see her friend, but the doctor had already told Hetty all about Bonnie and Lou's experience in the cool oven. And Hetty said, Bonnie, what made you do such a thing? And Bonnie put her head down. I was curious. And Hetty said, I'm sure glad that you prayed and God gave you the idea about that note. And Bonnie said, I'm certainly glad he made me think of it. And I'm certainly glad the measles are over and you're better. Well, boys and girls, I would like to remind you, think before you do things. That's why God gave you a brain. Don't forget to ask Him when you need help. And He may answer with just a thought of just what you should do. Thank you, boys and girls, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.